it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We're focusing in on the importance of learning to adapt and be resilient when it comes to change and moving through really the education process and the journey process of learning about a narcissistic individual or relationship, a close relationship to you, one that has been really impactful and has resonated with you, and perhaps even gone so far as to alter the direction of your life. And I had a very interesting client who described this experience as having his mind being basically being like brain hacked. I thought that was a beautiful way to basically experience basically portray the experience of what it's like to be love bombed, devalued, and discarded by a narcissistic or psychopathic type of individual. In other words, this person had so embraced him in the beginning through the love bombing, through the all sorts of different ideas and a grandiosity that pervaded this female's personality, where she just loved to talk about new business ideas and would spend countless hours kind of dreaming up, but she would never really follow through, which is a very hallmark trait of a narcissist. Likewise, a psychopath. The grandiosity tends to get in the way of having a truly healthful and functional relationship. In other words, the ego is so larger than life. It is so just bigger than life and all-consuming of them that they tend to really denigrate others or put down others who they really do have a true valid reason to embrace and enjoy these types of individuals. So even though these people make great lovers, great partners, great confidants, great supporters, great nurturers, even though they possess all the qualities, the psychopath and the narcissist tend to alienate these types of people. And when I say alienate, I basically mean push away. They're very unreceptive to the very people who they really need in their life to be fulfilled. They tend to overlook their contributions. They tend to ignore their good deeds. Their comments and their support and really the good fit of the relationship tends to fall on deaf ears. And so it doesn't really take root in them. Relationships, the good people, all the positive gestures, the positive statements, the positive changes and sacrifices that are required really for relationships to grow, evolve, and become something better. It's very contradictory because there's a sacrifice needed before one is then able to grow. So they're not able to see this with their own eyes. They're not able to validate this through their verbalization, through their emotions, through really their commitment to the other individual. So oftentimes it seems as if this person is almost committophobic, where they just don't follow through. Especially the psychopathic individual, they really do not have a lot of inner drive to really kind of complete oftentimes projects for project's sake. It's more just, can they get what they want? And oftentimes they're looking for the easy way out. They want someone else to do the dirty work. They want someone else to take care of loose ends. They want someone else to do a lot of the work in the rafters and the shadows, so to speak, while they then receive a lot of the accolades. And they oftentimes are very unloyal, very disloyal individuals. I mean, your pet would be there for you more so than a psychopathic individual. These people are very disingenuous, don't have a great deal of loyalty, and will turn on you in the drop of a feather. So you can't really count on them. You can't really rely on them. You can't look to them for really that sort of interdependence, that sort of building phenomenon, that momentum that you get with wonderful relationships where, you're following, you're living the dream together. And so I thought it was very poignant when he mentioned this statement that he feels like, his brain has been hacked. In other words, he still tends to ruminate. He tends to continue to think about this individual, even though they've moved on with their life, even though they have, they've texted other people and created a lot of very traumatic situations, very hurtful to this individual. Yet, yet they have brought, a triangulation, other people who have kind of been texted into the relationship, or who they've met and who they don't really, flesh out in, in the relationship. In other words, there's a lot of covert communication going on. Texting in the, in the other room, shutting really the valuable people out, saying that they don't have time for them, or they need time to be by themselves, so to an excess, to the point where the other person, i.e. this individual who I was consulting with, was really doing a lot of the work, making a lot of the sacrifices, but then it kind of feels like, you end up with empty arms. You kind of feel like you have nothing after all this contribution, and that is really what is so difficult. So I want to bring up a very important concept, and that is that with learning about all the different types of people in life, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, etc., you learn oftentimes that people who are beautiful are the people who are beautiful inside. So you might be attracted to certain people who you felt were attractive, but once you learn that they're narcissistic or psychopathic, that person is no longer that attractive. They're no longer that good looking to you. They're no longer that appealing. So I think it's very important to realize that this individual really would not provide you a lot of the fulfillment and happiness that you're really looking for, that you're really aspiring to, that you really want. So it will not be a productive relationship. And so when you feel kind of like you're hanging on to it, you're still kind of in the momentum of trying to still kind of work it out, and you've got these hopes and dreams. It's like this rainbow of the illusion, this grandiosity, which you feel is so different from this individual outside of, what anybody else has kind of made you feel in these relationships. Realize that it's okay to come back to center. Realize that it's okay to learn to establish your boundaries and raise your standards. And if you have had a background where you do not have a lot of experience declaring boundaries with other people based on perhaps your family of origin, if you don't have a lot of experience, repetition and experience with saying no, putting the foot down, if you've been raised by other narcissistic individuals who operated with a lot of boundary violations, caused you to lose your innocence, having to deal with a lot of emotional neglect and abuse, situations that were very uncomfortable, or shaming, where you were constantly told, you're in trouble, you're no good, what did you do this time? Just constant chronic criticism, shaming, guilt trip, that whole parenting, which oftentimes is more a reflection of the parent's shortcomings versus the shortcomings of that individual. So because they didn't have a lot of the skills, nurturing to work through emotions, guide their children and, kind of at their level, and then bring them up, raise them up, as they say, rear a child, that oftentimes, because they're so overwhelmed, they tend to be insulting, violating, shaming. And this creates what we call a boundary violation, where you don't really have a sense of yourself, and then a sense of boundaries, meaning if someone always insults you, you tend to feel shame-based, have low self-esteem, that so, inferiority kind of pervasive, around, and you kind of, this sets you up then to constantly try to people please, so you don't feel that anymore, and you tend to be kind of like walked over, or tend to constantly put others first. So if you're constantly putting others first, realize that this is a habit that needs to get unlearned. You need to learn perhaps to flip the switch, do a 180, and realize it's okay to take care of yourself and to put yourself first. And if there's nothing wrong, if you are constantly habituated to attending to a family member or a narcissist who cause you to constantly focus on them, their needs, that's what we call it, really, a loss of innocence. If you constantly had to focus on your parents' needs or siblings' needs, rather than living your own life, rather than being free, rather than being industrious, you had an inferiority at that developmental stage, instead of autonomy, and being independent, you became more dependent. Instead of becoming industrious, you felt inferior. So there's kind of like these different routes that these developmental stages can then lead to. So if you had kind of gone down that path of feeling more dependent, inferior, looking to others and constantly pleasing them, versus someone telling you, reinforcing you, good job, you did it, you've got this, you can think this through, you can work this problem through, and you've got this natural problem solving mechanism in you, which people do. If you allow yourself the self-esteem to value yourself, you'll kick it into gear. And once you can kick it into gear and do this repeatedly and realize, I've got the solution, I can man up, I can woman up, I can pony up here, I can be myself and not feel guilty, I can hold myself up with self-esteem and self-value and not be arrogant, and not be a doormat, not be just walked over. Find that balance. And as you continue to do this again and again, and it is a process, personal transformation is not just like, you take one magic pill and then you finally get it. It is a process. It is a working through. It is a kind of a crunching of information, putting it into effect, validating it back and forth with someone who gets it, and then the lessons become learned. So just like, any training for any job or any skill, a skill is learned over time, and as you use it again and again and again, it becomes stronger, more refined, sharper. So the same thing is with overcoming the impact of narcissistic or psychopathic abuse and that boundary violation, the feeling of being mind hacked. Once you realize that that was really an effect or a feeling of being an extension of another, having to attend to an other's needs rather than your own, which is what we call a boundary violation, and then learning to focus that again and again and again and have that impact all areas of your life. Basically, once you realize it's okay, you give yourself permission now to live the life that you're intended. It's a purpose. I give myself permission. It's a permission base. And then you learn the boundaries where it's okay to say no. And it's okay not to take care of others first. You take care of yourself first. And when you do this and don't feel guilty, you then begin to experience what we call self-esteem, or valuing of oneself as a person. And your posture changes, your emotional body changes, your energetic vibration, kind of, your problem-solving abilities kick into play. So when someone is going to violate you, insult you, you'll have, once you realize that that's not acceptable, that it's not tolerable, you do not need to remain in a relationship where that is ongoing and where that is expected of you, that there's this hierarchy where you're, very much lower and then you're subservient to this other, especially when you talk about intimate relationships. Yes, someone might have leadership qualities and you two complement each other, but when others just kind of use the narcissistic manipulation techniques of devaluation and discarding, that's not a healthy relationship. And so, yes, it is a transformational relationship. And yes, you want to learn about these people. And no, you don't want your future relationships to be this way. And so to really learn that and really to acknowledge it and move forward so that you're not attracting these people into your life, it's really getting that sense of I am and feeling good about yourself as an empowered person, and that you don't need to have this negative, constant voice playing. And when you do hear that, shut it down, delete, give it back to its source and say, you know what, that message was an error. That has nothing to do with reality. That has nothing to do with me. That was a flawed person trying to flaw me. That was a wounded person trying to wound me. Now I'm healing myself through acknowledging this. And as we talk about, emotional wounds need emotional salve. So that's where the verbalization and what we call the self-talk in the really kind of the vision of yourself, you have to get that image of yourself and how you would like to be. Any business owner, athlete, anyone, any movie star, whatever, anyone who's accomplished has had a vision for their life. So that's what I'm encouraging you to create now, is create that vision, create that objective, create your goals of what you want to do, be, have, become. And like we talk about in the recovery journal, and knowing really those figures who you look up to in life, keeping pictures, of them around, or just in your recovery journal, or at least acknowledge it if you look on the internet and realize that you emulate these people and you want these people to be really kind of like your role models. And then furthermore, understand, about how that person, accomplished and got the growth that they did, so you can format yourself on a healthier track versus a track set forth for you by a narcissist who is giving you all sorts of sundry negative comments, looks, flippant remarks, and treatment and behavior, because that is not the real you. That is more a reflection of a narcissist and not of a healthy individual, which you are. Peace and harmony here with you here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.